So, just like so many, this was the first film in a very long time that I can truly say I was really excited to go see. I think that from the first time that I saw the trailer and the concept of the movie, I knew that I had to go see it. And I personally really enjoyed it, but I can also understand why the reception to it seems to be a bit 50-50 because I think a lot of people maybe went into it thinking that it was going to be a straightforward horror film, but it turned out to be more of a psychological thriller vibe, which I can understand is not for everyone. But I personally really love psychological thrillers, so it was right up my alley. I thought the film really exceeded my expectations. I think the actor, I don't want to butcher his name, Chiwetel Ejiofor, he did an excellent job with playing the character Clark. I really enjoyed his performance. He was also really fine too. I never realized how handsome he is. He kind of reminds me of Chadwick Boseman in a way. But yeah, like I said, I think the whole concept of taking the Backrooms trend and turning it into a horror film is what really drew people in. And I think they did a great job with it. I really loved how they decided to take the Backrooms concept and basically make it a metaphor for the unconscious mind. Or at least that was my personal take on it. And I think that much like how our unconscious mind processes events through the lens of our own subjectivity, the Backrooms also had a distorted interpretation of events and people, so I can see the correlation there. So the supposed monsters of the Backrooms are really just the inner demons that are lurking within our own minds, made manifest. I of course found Clark's character interesting because even though a specific diagnosis was never discussed in the movie, his unwillingness to accept fault and his inflated ego and the disregard for others could definitely point to maybe narcissistic personality disorder or definitely psychopathy at certain points in the movie. And so I think that his character gave a glimpse into maybe the inner workings of such people. I think it's further demonstrated in the movie, in the scene where Mary finally admits to him that she actually doesn't know how to help him, and that his condition is just the way that he's mentally wired. Because data does show that improvement after therapy for individuals who do have narcissistic personality disorder is actually very rare. So much so that some therapists don't even bother taking them as clients because there's an unwillingness or an inability to truly change. And I think that was shown in the film because we see how Clark wasn't in therapy to do the work of confronting himself. He didn't really want to change so much as he just wanted like an easy fix to relieve the weight of his ego, his shame, and his guilt. And he eventually discovered that retreating from the real world and into the back rooms was that easy fix that he had been looking for. In the end, he simply wanted Mary to tell him that he was right about everything in order to feed his ego. And his ego, ironically, ended up literally feeding on him. Because I personally interpreted the Captain Clark monster as a manifestation of his ego. And the ego is that roadblock that prevents growth from happening because Clark's need to be right ultimately trumped over his desire to change. And I'd like to think that maybe the reason why Clark just so happened to fall into the back rooms was maybe it was the universe's final desperate attempt at getting him to face himself by getting to physically see his own inner demon. And I think that's why Clark died the very moment that he gave up on trying. When he decided to give in to the feeling of complacency and thinking that he didn't need to change anymore, that was when he literally got eaten alive by Captain Clark. I think that ultimately he got killed by his own ego because he refused to kill his ego. And I just really appreciated that message because it's really an important one, and I think that it has the power to potentially open up some really interesting and insightful conversations because I'm already seeing some people online who are saying that they do see themselves in Clark. I do think there were some underlying themes about misogyny and gender-based violence as well, because really all the people that Clark caused harm to throughout the movie were women, which were obviously his wife, Mary, and his female employee. When it came to the male employee, you can argue that he did set him up, but ultimately he didn't really intend for him to die. But with the female employee, he obviously very brutally beheads her, and we don't ever get to really find out the events that led up to that. With Mary, he does end up strangling her unconscious, and with his wife, we really don't get the full backstory either of everything that he had done to her, but we know that he was a drunk within the marriage, and we see through the still life version of her in the back rooms and the sheer terror that she has of the Captain Clark monster. And even in his interactions with the still life version of his wife, we see the scene where he, takes the hair off of her scalp in a very grotesque manner. And we just see his tendency toward violence, especially throughout that scene. But yeah, those were my general thoughts on the dynamics between the characters. Yeah, I thought it was a really good movie overall. Definitely a movie that I would give a second watch. So I'm curious to know in the comments, did you watch the movie? Did you enjoy it? And what was your interpretation of it and what the Backrooms represented?